Some falls don't break a bone. No ambulance is called. No bruise is left behind. But they leave something much bigger fear. Mr. Harold Bennett, age 74, once loved walking. As a sacred part of his morning ritual, each morning he and his wife would stroll around the neighborhood, stop by their favorite coffee shop, and return home before the sun fully rose. Until one morning he simply turned to grab the kettle in the kitchen and slipped. It wasn't serious, but from that day on, something in his stride changed his confidence. He started walking slower, kept his eyes on the floor more often. His hands searched constantly for something to hold on to. The familiar paths he knew by heart now felt unfamiliar, like they were working against him every tile, every stair. Then there's Mrs. Grace Miller, 72, from Portland. Still strong, still doing the groceries, still taking her grandson on walks every afternoon. But one morning while carrying a cup of tea to her grandson, she stumbled slightly on the doorway threshold. She didn't fall, but the worried look on her daughter's face as she rushed over made Grace feel different. From that day on, she no longer walked quickly, stopped going barefoot, and began to feel she had to be more careful, even though she still longed for the carefree ease she once had. The truth is, Harold and Grace are not alone. In the U.S., over 800,000 older adults are hospitalized each year due to falls. But what many don't realize is this: most of these falls don't come from illness. They come from subtle, quiet, and gradual changes in how we walk. Steps get shorter. Heads hang lower. Arms stay still by the sides. Shoes are soft and comfy, but disconnect our feet from the ground. And these things we think are just normal, slowly become the very reason a once steady body becomes vulnerable to a simple misstep. But here's the good news. Not all falls are inevitable, and we don't need pills or machines to avoid them. We just need to relearn how to walk properly, just like Harold and Grace did. In today's video, Elderly TV invites you to discover 7 simple yet powerful habits that seniors around the world are using to walk more steadily every day. No tough workouts, no strenuous routines, just a few minutes a day and a small shift in awareness. And tip number 6, it's one of the most common mistakes. Over 90% of older adults make it without realizing. It's quietly making them more prone to falls. If you've ever felt hesitant to walk fast, held onto the stair railing longer than usual, or quietly backed out of an afternoon walk, this video is for you, because sometimes adjusting just one small step can help you reclaim an entire world of freedom, steadiness, and peace beneath your feet. Tip 1. Keep your steps wide enough. Don't walk like you're on a tightrope. After his fall in the kitchen, Mr. Harold began to walk differently. No one taught him to do this. No doctor told him to. But after that fall, his body responded instinctively with fear. Each step began to narrow, one foot landing close to the other, as if he were walking on a tightrope. At first he didn't notice. He only knew he was moving slower, his shoulders swaying slightly, and sometimes he felt like he was losing balance. Even on a perfectly flat floor, he thought maybe it was just aging, that his knees weren't as strong, that his back was starting to stoop with the years. Then one day, during a senior community activity, he joined a gentle movement class. There, the instructor, a physical therapist, asked him a question that seemed simple. When you walk, do you notice the distance between your feet? Mr. Harold hesitated. I guess. They're pretty close together, the instructor nodded. That's exactly the issue. According to many studies, walking with steps that are too narrow, where the feet land almost in a straight line, is a key factor increasing fall risk in older adults. When the space between the feet is too small, the body loses its stable base. It's like walking on a narrow plank, or worse, a string. Balance issues don't come from weak muscles alone, but from not having enough space between the feet to create a steady foundation. And the surprising part is many seniors, like Harold, do this without even knowing. That day, the instructor introduced a very simple exercise called the double track. Harold just needed to place 2 strips of colored tape on the floor, side by side, spaced about the width of his hips. Each day he walked back and forth along these 2 tracks for 5 to 10 minutes, making sure each foot stayed on its own path. without stepping into the middle. At first, it felt strange. I kept feeling like I was walking too wide. Like it wasn't natural, he said. But after a few days, his body started to adjust. 2 weeks later, he didn't need the tape anymore. His feet automatically kept the right distance. He smiled and said, "It felt like I finally got the ground back under my feet." When your steps are spaced just right, the body forms a solid rectangle at the base, like a strong foundation. This allows your back to stay straight, your shoulders to relax, and your head to move naturally without constant adjustment. But when your steps are too narrow, your body becomes like an upside-down triangle, easy to tip over when facing obstacles or even just turning around. What Harold learned wasn't just a physical exercise. It was a deeply human lesson. That stability doesn't come from walking hard, but from walking the right way. Now every morning when he steps outside, Harold no longer looks down at his feet. He looks ahead, and with each step he feels it clearly. He's not just walking with his legs. He's walking with a sense of control he once lost, and has now found again. Tip 2: pause for 3 seconds before changing direction. Mr. Harold's first fall didn't happen while climbing a hill or going down the stairs. It happened in his own kitchen on an ordinary morning. He had simply turned to grab the kettle behind him. A small movement, but when his feet didn't rotate with his body in time, he lost his balance and fell sideways. There was no injury, but the fear it caused was enough to make him afraid of turning quickly ever again. From then on, he walked slowly, turned carefully, and felt as if his body no longer obeyed him the way it used to. He thought maybe he was just getting weaker, that this was part of normal aging. But when he joined a community wellness class in his neighborhood, he discovered something much simpler. He had been rushing through moments where he should have slowed down. The instructor in the class called these transition moments, when we change direction, turn our heads, stop suddenly, or step from one surface to another. These movements, though brief, are when the body is most likely to lose balance. And the solution, surprisingly, wasn't heavy training or equipment. It was something gentle, a simple pause for 3 seconds. Just 3 seconds before each turn, before entering a hallway, before reaching behind. 3 seconds to allow the body to settle, align the head and feet, and clearly see where the next step will land. At first, Harold didn't believe it would make a difference. It felt silly, he said, like I was making myself act older than I really am. But then one day, as he was walking into the bathroom, where the tile floor is always a bit slick, he remembered the lesson. He paused, just for a few seconds, and in that moment, he realized his feet hadn't yet found solid ground after his previous step. Had he turned like usual, he might have lost his balance again. After that, he began placing small, red dot stickers at risky spots around the house: the dining table corner door thresholds, the bottom step of the stairs. Every time he saw a red dot, he stopped. 3 seconds. Not long, not hard, but enough for him to feel his body realign. After a week, he no longer needed the dots. The pause had become a habit, an automatic part of his walking rhythm, and strangely, the more he paused, the more confidently he walked. Now, whenever he's about to turn, Harold no longer hurries. He slows down, breathes evenly, and quietly says to himself, "Pause steady, then move." To him, those 3 seconds are not just a balance technique. They're a reminder that he's still in control of his journey, even if his legs aren't as fast as they once were. One slow step, but full of intention. One small moment, but enough to prevent a fall. That could change everything. Tip 3. Swing your arms properly. Don't let them fall asleep when you walk. After his fall, Mr. Harold didn't just slow his steps. He also changed how he held his arms. He often kept his hands in his coat pockets, especially on chilly mornings. Sometimes he crossed his arms over his stomach, almost like hugging himself. He thought it made him feel safer. But what he didn't realize was this: when your arms stop swinging, your body begins to lose its natural balance. One day during a rehab class, the instructor noticed Harold's arms staying still at his sides, or stiffly locked when he walked. She asked, "Do you still let your arms swing naturally when you walk?" Harold shook his head. "I guess not. I haven't really noticed." That answer was enough for her to smile and say, "Then it's time to wake your arms up." For younger people, swinging arms is automatic. When the right foot steps forward, the left arm swings forward and vice versa. That symmetry isn't just for appearance. It's one of the body's natural balancing mechanisms while in motion. It reduces upper body sway, stabilizes the rotation of the hips, and helps steps feel smoother and more even. When the arms stay still, the body loses that counterweight. And the older we get, the more likely we are to forget something that once felt second nature. At first, Harold said, trying to swing his arms again made him feel like a child learning to walk. It felt awkward. My arms were stiff. I didn't know where to place them, he said. But then the instructor taught him a very simple trick. Just bend the elbows gently at about a 45-degree angle. Let the arms swing lightly with the steps, never going beyond the belly button in front, and lightly brushing the hips in back. No swinging side to side. No twisting the torso. No forcing it. Just let the body adjust naturally with a bit of practice. He started with 5 minutes each morning, walking down the hallway in his home. Each step, each gentle arm swing, it felt like he was waking up an old melody that had been tucked away in memory. Just a few days in, he felt his steps becoming smoother. His body felt less heavy. And what surprised him most, his wife noticed it first. "This morning you walked like you used to, back when you'd take me to the park every Sunday," she said. Her words made Harold laugh, not just out of joy, but because he realized he was reviving an old rhythm he thought he had lost. To Harold, swinging his arms was no longer just a mechanical act. It became a way to reconnect with himself. His hands were no longer asleep. They reached forward like a greeting, then returned like a reminder that he was still walking, still balanced, still living with intention in his own body. And the wonder of it all, just by letting his arms move the right way, the world around him seemed to move more gently too. Now every morning when he steps outside, Harold no longer hides his hands in his pockets. He lets them move freely. Right hand, left hand footsteps and breath, all moving together like a quiet symphony of freedom. And to Harold, it's no longer just walking. It's his way of reclaiming ownership over each step in his life. Tip 4. Look ahead instead of down. Mrs. Grace Miller always thought of herself as a careful person. At age 72, she still did her own grocery shopping, took her granddaughter to the park every morning, and tended her small backyard garden. But after nearly tripping, while carrying a cup of tea across a doorway, she unknowingly developed a new habit. She started looking down every time she walked. At first, she thought it was just common sense. Look down to spot obstacles. Look down to see if the floor was slick or dry. Look down to be sure. But over time, it began to wear on her. Her back started to hunch slightly. Her neck ached every time she looked up, and most importantly, she lost the confidence she used to feel when stepping outside. One day while walking in the park with her granddaughter, little Ellie held her hand and asked, "Grandma, why don't you look at me anymore? You always look at the ground." That question made Grace pause, not out of embarrassment, but because she suddenly realized how long had it been since she dared to look straight ahead while walking. At a senior support group meeting, a physical therapist introduced a simple yet forgotten technique, the 3-level gaze. It sounded odd, but it was easy to apply. Level 1, look about 6 to 10 feet ahead, just enough to catch obstacles in time. Level 2, look 30 to 50 feet out, to allow the spine to naturally adjust, promoting better posture. And Level 3, maintain spatial awareness by using peripheral vision, keeping the sides of your surroundings in view instead of constantly staring at the floor. Mrs. Grace began trying it the very next day. At first, she felt nervous. Looking ahead made her worry. She might miss an uneven spot below. But after a few days of practice, she noticed something surprising. When her head lifted, her back straightened. When her back straightened, her steps became more stable. And when her steps felt steady, she no longer needed to look down. One small change led to a chain of others, like links in a chain of self-assurance she thought she had lost. She shared that within a week. Her shoulder tension and neck pain nearly disappeared. She no longer felt dizzy when turning her head. And the most surprising part, people around her noticed it first. "You look brighter, walk straighter," and seem more confident, they told her. One neighbor even said, "Mrs. Grace, you look like you've gotten younger." Biologically, when we look down too often, the head shifts forward, the shoulders collapse, and the spine curves. This misalignment throws off the body's center of gravity, making each step feel heavier and less balanced. But when the gaze is lifted, the entire musculoskeletal system adjusts to support upright posture, from your eyes to your feet. Everything coordinates more smoothly. Now, every morning at the park, Mrs. Grace no longer watches every paving stone beneath her. She looks toward the oak tree at the path's entrance. She looks to the bench where her granddaughter likes to read. And sometimes she even looks at strangers, just to offer a gentle smile, instead of hurrying past with her eyes fixed downward. She says, "I don't walk like I'm worried anymore. I walk like I'm truly living in each moment." For Grace, that lesson didn't just help her avoid a fall. It helped her lift her head in every sense of the word, and sometimes that matters even more than balance itself. Tip 5. Your feet can speak, but only if your shoes are willing to listen. After changing the way she looked while walking, Mrs. Grace noticed a clear improvement in her posture, but something still felt off. Whenever she walked on uneven surfaces, grass, gravel, or cracked pavement, she still felt a little unsteady. Not enough to fall, but just enough to make her slow down and watch every step. One afternoon, while walking across a brick path in the park, she hesitated at a tile that stuck up slightly. She didn't trip, but she realized something strange. Her feet hadn't sent any warning. It was as if they didn't register the shift beneath them in time for her body to react. When she got home, she took off her usual pair of shoes, the thick-soled slip-ons she'd worn for nearly 2 years, and looked at them closely. They were shoes she once loved, soft and easy to wear. But in that moment, she asked herself, can comfort be a problem if it dulls your sense of touch? At a consultation at the senior community center, the physical therapist told her something she would never forget. The wrong shoes disconnect your feet from the ground, and when your feet stop sensing, your whole body walks blindfolded. That sentence awakened something in her. She decided it was time to change. The doctor gave her 3 simple rules for choosing shoes as an older adult. First, the heel should be low and wide, not completely flat, but no higher than 1 inch. Second, the front of the sole should be flexible, able to bend slightly at the toes so the foot can move naturally. And third, the shoes must have a secure closure, either laces or Velcro, never loose slip-ons. Grace tried on a pair that met all 3 criteria. The moment she stepped into them, she felt her feet touch the ground in a whole new way. Clearer, quicker to respond. Her feet felt as if they were waking up from a long nap. But what she did next made all the difference. She began strengthening her feet. Every morning before walking, Mrs. Grace spent 5 minutes on 3 simple exercises. First, she curled and stretched her toes. She called it saying good morning to the toes. Then she placed a small towel on the floor and used her toes to scrunch it toward her, like she was folding her attention inward. Lastly, she scattered a few marbles on the ground and picked them up one by one with her toes, a game she once thought was for kids, but it helped her feel every muscle in the soles of her feet. After just 2 weeks, she noticed herself walking more steadily on grass, no longer avoiding stone-paved sidewalks, and even balancing better while standing on 1 foot to put on socks. She didn't have to feel her way anymore. Her feet didn't just carry her. They quietly alerted her to every shift beneath them. Mrs. Grace once believed that aging meant accepting stiffness. Now she thinks differently. Our bodies can still learn, she said, if we give them the chance. And the right shoes are the place to start. For her, walking was no longer just about movement. It became a quiet conversation between the ground and her feet. And with a little patience and a willingness to listen, she had finally heard that voice again, after all these years. Tip 6, walk hip-width apart, not like you're on a tightrope. Mrs. Grace never imagined that the distance between her feet, while walking, could make such a difference. For years, she walked the same way everyone else did, neat, narrow steps in a straight line down an imaginary path. She believed it was the right way. Neat meant graceful. Narrow meant light. But her body didn't agree. One morning, while stepping across the uneven garden stones to water her plants, she felt a slight wobble in her hips. Not enough to fall, but enough to make her pause. It was a familiar sensation, like those moments she nearly lost her balance, walking across the thick rug in the living room, or while crossing the sloped lawn in the park. A quiet, hard-to-describe instability. When she mentioned it to the physical activity instructor, at her senior group, the young woman gently said, "You're walking too narrowly. It's like you're a tightrope walker." Grace laughed, then fell silent, because the instructor was right. As we age, many of us, out of fear of tripping or losing balance, start walking with narrower steps, feet nearly in line, each step like walking on a thread. But as experts explain, this actually reduces the body's natural base of support, making each step less stable, not more. The instructor suggested a simple exercise. Take 2 strips of colored tape, place them on the floor, in parallel lines spaced the width of your hips. Every day, walk along these double tracks for 5 minutes, keeping each foot on its own line without crossing into the other. Grace gave it a try. At first, it felt awkward, like she was walking too wide, clumsy even. But after just a few sessions, she began to feel lighter. Each step now felt like placing her foot on a broad, solid surface. No more side-to-side wobble. No more stiff shoulders trying to overcompensate for balance. Her body began to adjust naturally, from her hips to her knees to her ankles. With wider steps, her center of gravity stabilized. Her arms swung freely, her neck relaxed. She no longer had to hold herself together with every step. She could just walk. After a week, she no longer needed tape on the floor. The image of double tracks had imprinted itself in her body's awareness. Grace shared that for the first time in months. She walked across the gravel path in the park without stopping. And what made her smile most? She wasn't walking harder or faster. She was simply walking better. Experts call this the widened base technique. When feet remain hip-width apart, the body forms a solid rectangle at its base, a strong foundation that resists lateral sway, sudden terrain shifts, or even a gust of wind. But when steps are too narrow, it's like walking on a single thread, graceful perhaps, but one small change, and balance is lost. Grace said what she learned wasn't just a walking technique. It was a life lesson. To stay balanced in life, we don't always need to move faster. Sometimes we just need to give ourselves more room to stand. Each morning now, when she steps outside, she imagines 2 invisible tracks stretched beneath her feet, and lets her body lead the way. No more trembling. No more tension. Just walking light, yet grounded. Slow, yet certain. And on that familiar path, she knows she's not just keeping her body steady. She's also restoring her faith in aging, in the belief that there are still things we can control if we're willing to relearn how to take each step. Tip 7. Don't rush when changing positions. Give your body time to adjust. That morning, Mrs. Grace only meant to stand up from her chair to answer the door for the mailman. A simple act, something she had done hundreds of times before. But the moment she rose from her armchair in the living room, her legs gave out, her head spun slightly, and her body tilted to the right. She had to grip the armrest to stay upright. No one saw it happen. There was no injury, but she stood there still and silent for a long time. For the first time in her life, she felt like time was moving faster than her body could handle. That day she skipped her usual walk. She sat back down in her familiar armchair, one hand still clinging to the armrest. What filled her wasn't pain, but a question. Why do things that once felt as easy as breathing now need preparation? The answer came the next afternoon, when she shared the story with her physical activity specialist. The young woman smiled, as if she'd heard this story hundreds of times from other seniors, and said, "Transitions are when people fall the most because the body hasn't had time to realize it's shifting." She taught Grace a simple technique called pause to reset. Every time you move from sitting to standing to walking, or walking to turning, pause for 3 seconds. Just 3 seconds. Time to breathe in gently, brace your core. Let your eyes lock onto your next destination, and let your feet feel the ground. When all senses are back online, then move. Grace understood it in theory, but practicing it felt awkward. 3 seconds, such a small number, yet in real life it felt longer than expected. She felt like she was moving unnaturally slow. But then she remembered something. Mr. Harold had shared during their first support group meeting that it was his habit of rushing to turn and grab the kettle that had led to his fall, that he too had learned to pause for 3 seconds before changing direction, and since then he'd never stumbled again. His story was a quiet confirmation, and enough for Grace to take it seriously. From that day on, every morning, when she stood from her chair, she paused. Her eyes looked toward the door, her core gently tightened, her back straightened, her feet took in the feel of the floor. 3 seconds. Then she moved. Not quickly, but steadily. No more wobble every time she changed position. She started placing small, sticky notes around the house. On the armrest, the bedpost, the bathroom door, each with a single word, pause. Not as a warning, but as a reminder, slowing down isn't weakness. It's giving her body the chance to catch up with her mind. Experts call these transitional moments the short windows where over 80% of unnoticed falls happen. Not while walking across the street, but right when we stand up, make a turn step up, or look back. It's in those fleeting seconds, if we're unprepared, that our legs aren't ready, our eyes aren't focused, and our heads haven't caught up. But if we learn to stop, listen to our bodies, and give them a few slow beats to adjust, those most dangerous seconds can become the safest ones in our day. After a week, Grace no longer needed the sticky notes. Every time she changed position, she paused, not out of fear of falling, but because she was now used to feeling in control. And one afternoon, while walking in the park, she happened to see Mr. Harold again, and they both burst out laughing when they realized they had both paused for 3 seconds before stepping down the curb. No words were needed. That shared look of understanding was enough to affirm. Sometimes the smallest things are what keep us most steady for a lifetime. Dear friends, 7 tips today. They may sound like a lot, but for Mr. Harold and Mrs. Grace, each one was just a small change. A lifted gaze, a wider step, a gentle swing of the arm, a quiet 3-second pause. Nothing heavy, nothing that demanded youth. But together, these tiny shifts brought back something much bigger, a sense of control with every single step. Mr. Harold once believed that after his fall, he'd never be steady enough to take walks with his wife again. Mrs. Grace nearly gave up her afternoon grocery trips for fear of a low doorstep, but neither of them had grown weaker. They just needed a reminder. The body can still relearn if we give it a chance. No gym, no machines, no doctor standing by, just a little awareness and a little patience. From widening their steps, lifting their eyes, swinging their arms naturally to pausing before turning. These small habits made them not only steadier on their feet, but also lighter in their hearts as they moved through aging. One crisp autumn morning, they happened to run into each other at the park. Both paused at the foot of a small step. One paused for 3 seconds. The other looked ahead. No words were spoken, but their smiles and nods said everything. We are still walking, in control, with grace. Neither of them grew younger, but both reclaimed a sense of mastery over their bodies, something many lose simply because they forget to listen. And if you, like Harold or Grace, have hesitated at the curb or feared turning down a hallway, please remember, it's never too late to begin again. Just one change, then another, and before you know it, you'll find that aging still holds many things you can control, if you know where to start. If these stories touched you, we invite you to leave a comment, share this video with someone you love, and subscribe to Elderly TV. We'll be back soon with more gentle, meaningful stories for those who treasure every step of growing older.